Hey everyone, did you know that over 90% of you watching right now haven't hit that subscribe button? If you enjoy our content, take a second to subscribe. It's free and it really helps us keep bringing you great stories every day. It began with a whisper in my own mind, something quiet, a suspicion I tried to ignore for weeks. My name is Armin Voss, and I've built a career on seeing what others overlook. In the world of cybersecurity, patterns are everything. You learn to read silence as deeply as noise. You learn to sense when something is off, even if the data doesn't yet confirm it. And that's exactly what happened at home. I'd been married to Claire for 11 years. We met at a conference in Vancouver. Her talk on childhood behavioral neurology had been packed, standing room only. Claire wasn't just intelligent, she had presence. Her calm, warm voice could soothe any child in distress, and she had this ability to make people feel seen. I admired that. I still do, even now, despite everything. Our son Leo was diagnosed with a language processing disorder last spring. It hit us hard. I blamed myself at first. Some latent genetic quirk I passed down, some gap I hadn't anticipated. Claire, being a child psychologist, took it with clinical calm. "We catch it early," she said, "and we work with it. This is not a life sentence." I believed her. We hired Evan a few months later. He came highly recommended, young, energetic, Ivy League credentials polished to a sheen. A private tutor who specialized in learning disorders. He had the kind of effortless charm that immediately wins over both kids and adults. Leo adored him. He made learning fun. Games, puzzles, music. It was working. I was grateful at first. Evan took pressure off us both. Claire resumed her work with renewed focus. I dug into a contract with an international firm that took me off the grid for stretches. Life, though fraying at the edges, still held its shape. But then, small things. Claire's phone would buzz at night, briefly, silently. She said it was a group chat with her therapy colleagues. She'd leave the room to take calls sometimes. Evan began showing up earlier and leaving later than agreed. Once, I returned home early from a client site visit, and I saw Claire and Evan speaking in low tones in the kitchen. They didn't notice me right away, and when they did, it was like watching a stage curtain fall. Bright smiles, quick excuses. The seed of doubt took root. I tried to dismiss it, chalk it up to stress or misinterpretation, but I couldn't help myself. The very skills that made me good at my job began to turn inward, focused on my own home. One evening after they'd both gone out, Claire said she had a dinner with donors and Evan had left shortly before. I accessed our home router's activity logs. Most people forget that their devices leave fingerprints. Every login, every video stream, every connection request. It's all there. I found several entries that made my stomach twist. A private chat server session between Claire's laptop and Evan's device, recurring nightly. Encrypted, sure, but the metadata, the timing was suspicious. And then odd webcam activations from the playroom. Times when no tutoring was scheduled. I knew our system inside out. This wasn't a glitch. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I shifted into work mode, detached, clinical. I built a shadow surveillance layer across our home network. Keyloggers, packet sniffers, internal motion-activated recording via the baby monitors. I upgraded our internal cameras, disguised them better. I told Claire I was optimizing for Leo's online safety. She smiled, touched my arm. "That's why I love you. You think of everything." Over the next 2 weeks, I collected footage. Late-night meetings in the study, a hand brushing too long against an arm, whispered tones. And one moment, just one but enough, caught through a hallway mirror's reflection, where Claire kissed him. Not a peck, not friendly. I had my confirmation. I remember sitting alone in the garage that night, my laptop open in front of me, the silence around me vast and oppressive. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, numb, breathing through clenched teeth. But what came next wasn't revenge. It was protection. For Leo. Because what troubled me more than the affair itself was what I began to see in Leo. Subtle things. He flinched at sudden sounds. He hesitated when speaking, as if gauging whether it was safe. His drawings became darker, more chaotic. Once he asked me, "Is it okay if I don't like learning anymore?" I started reviewing the footage more carefully, not just for infidelity, but for behavioral patterns, Evan's tone toward Leo sometimes shifted, gentle at first, but then condescending. I watched him dismiss Leo's answers, correct him harshly when Claire wasn't around. And Claire, she wasn't always there when she said she was. There were gaps. Days she claimed to be working from home, yet the footage showed otherwise. Something was wrong beyond just betrayal. I began suspecting manipulation, psychological pressure exerted on Leo. Not overt abuse, no, but something quieter, subtler, a kind of coercion disguised as therapy. I knew I couldn't let this slide, but a confrontation wouldn't work. Claire had allies, powerful ones. Her online platform was growing. She'd been featured on parenting podcasts, local news, even shortlisted for a nonprofit board appointment. A public scandal would turn into a PR war and I'd lose. Worse, Leo would be caught in the storm. So I began a new operation. Quiet, tactical. I created backups of everything. Footage, chat logs, behavioral footage, timestamps. I looped in an old friend, a forensic child psychologist now based in Montreal, and shared anonymized clips of Leo. She confirmed my fears. This isn't just a child struggling with a learning disorder. He's compensating for something deeper. He's performing emotional labor way beyond his age. I gathered more. Evan had a side business, consulting for educational platforms, some of which had questionable data sharing practices. I traced IP overlaps, connected usage logs, and built a web of potential conflicts of interest. Nothing criminal yet, but unethical? Absolutely. I opened a secure vault, encrypted, air-gapped. Everything went in. I wasn't just preparing for confrontation. I was preparing for a war, legal, psychological, emotional. But I would never strike first. Still, Claire noticed the shift. She began asking more questions. "You seem distant," she said. "Work stress?" I nodded, smiled. "Just a rough quarter." But I could see it in her eyes. She felt the distance too. The cracks in our carefully curated life were beginning to spread. We both knew, on some unconscious level, that the house of cards was trembling. And then, one night, I overheard something through Leo's monitor that chilled me more than anything else. Evan was reading to him, alone. Claire was supposedly upstairs on a call. I had audio recording toggled. Evan said, "You know, you're really special, but you can't tell your daddy everything. Grown-ups don't always understand. This is just between us, okay?" Leo was silent. Then a whisper. "Okay." That was the moment the game changed for me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rescue. And I would burn down every firewall, every secret, every lie to make sure my son was safe. Even if it meant dismantling everything I thought I knew about the woman I once loved. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Leo's room long after he'd gone to bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, his little hand curled around the corner of his blanket. That moment, Evan's voice through the monitor echoed in my ears like a siren in a tunnel. "You can't tell your daddy everything." Those words changed something in me. This wasn't about an affair anymore. This wasn't about betrayal or pride or humiliation. It was about Leo, my son, my only child. The one thing in my life that had no conditions, no gray areas. I made a decision that night. I was going to fight, but not recklessly. I would prepare fully, methodically. I would not walk into a courtroom with only half a case. I needed more than suspicion. I needed narrative, context, proof that showed not just what was happening, but why it mattered. So I started documenting everything. Each moment, each conversation, each interaction between Leo and Evan. Every text from Claire that didn't line up with her calendar. Every odd pause in Leo's speech. Every behavioral shift. I didn't rely only on cameras. I mirrored Claire's phone remotely. She had no idea. I'd built the interface myself years ago for a client in Zurich. Military grade, undetectable on commercial devices. It wasn't long before I had full access to her messages. And there it was. Confirmation. Not just the affair, though it was all there, in detail. Inside jokes, blurred photos, coded language, but something more disturbing. Messages where they discussed strategies for Leo. Language that hinted at manipulation framed as therapy. I think he's starting to respond better now that we're consistent, Evan wrote once. Claire replied, yes, just keep affirming the shared reality. He'll align. Shared reality. Those words hit me like ice water. It sounded clinical, even professional, but twisted. This wasn't therapy. This was conditioning. Meanwhile, Leo was growing more reserved. One day he flinched when I touched his shoulder. It was subtle, but my heart cracked. He was distancing from me emotionally. I could feel it. He was being told something, whether directly or not, that made him hesitate around me. Doubt me. And Claire? She carried on as if nothing was wrong, smiling, making coffee, lightly kissing my cheek in the mornings. She was either the most gifted actress I'd ever seen, or she believed her own performance. Either way, it was chilling. I began consulting legal professionals quietly, carefully. Through encrypted messages and private forums, I found a family law specialist with experience in covert evidence and high-profile custody cases. I didn't share names, not yet. Just hypotheticals. But she understood immediately. Build your case like a prosecutor. You only get one chance to show the truth before it becomes about narratives and reputations, she warned me. She also told me what I didn't want to hear. Claire's media presence, her credentials, her network, they mattered. Courts love stability, familiarity, public image. I would need more than footage. I'd need testimony, patterns, documentation of harm, not just discomfort. So I doubled down. I had a friend at a behavioral data lab analyze hours of footage of Leo. His speech patterns, body language, facial expressions. The report was damning in its subtlety. The child exhibits signs of adaptive stress, the summary said. The type commonly found in children caught between conflicting authority figures. Possible coached responses. Notable inhibition of emotion when in presence of both parents simultaneously. I logged every finding. At the same time, Claire began to change. Slightly. She grew more attentive, oddly so. She started asking me about my schedule more than usual, where I was going, when I'd be home. It wasn't just curiosity, it was too precise, too deliberate. She was probing. I realized then she suspected something, maybe not everything, but enough. I played along, I smiled more, brought her coffee, asked about her clients, kept my tone easy, natural. It was like being in a spy thriller, only the stakes were painfully real and the enemy wasn't a stranger. It was the woman who shared my bed. Then one afternoon, Leo came to me with a drawing. It was a house split down the middle. On one side, me and him, smiling. On the other, Claire and Evan, both drawn with exaggerated red mouths, almost clown-like. Leo said it was a pretend house. I asked him what that meant. He said, it's the house when no one's watching. I had to excuse myself to the garage and sit in silence for half an hour. That night, I installed a new level of monitoring. Not because I wanted to catch more betrayal, but because I needed to know. Was Evan spending time alone with Leo when he wasn't supposed to? Claire had started giving Evan access to our house outside of tutoring sessions. He's just prepping materials, she'd say. He's great with Leo. But the footage said otherwise. 2 days later, while I was supposed to be at a client meeting, I watched through a live feed as Evan sat Leo down in the study. The audio was grainy but clear enough. Evan asked Leo questions, not about schoolwork, but about me. Personal things. What does Daddy do when you're sad? Does he ever yell? Do you think Daddy loves you as much as Mommy does? Each answer was followed by a kind of praise, subtle, manipulative. You're very brave for telling me that. I think you're right. Sometimes grown-ups aren't very good at showing love. It was grooming, not in the physical sense, but in the emotional one. Aligning the child to one adult narrative. Undermining trust. It was calculated. And Claire allowed it. No, I realized with slow, creeping certainty, she orchestrated it. I pulled records from the nanny cam installed under the bookshelf. It captured everything. I labeled the file, encrypted it, and stored it in the vault. I added notes, timestamps, psychologist recommendations. Then I made a final decision. I was going to file for full custody, but I wasn't going to tip my hand yet. Timing was everything. One wrong move and she'd claim fabrication, data tampering, emotional instability. I knew how these things played out in court. I'd seen it before with clients who'd been through divorce wars. So I waited and planned. Claire, meanwhile, had a new opportunity, an invitation to appear on a national parenting talk show. I watched her rehearse in the mirror, speaking lines about empathy, family, healing. Her voice soft, persuasive. The same voice she once used to talk to me at 2 a.m., when we dreamed together about raising Leo to be kind and strong. Now it sounded like a mask. Then came the twist I didn't expect. While reviewing metadata on Claire's messages, I stumbled upon a deleted email chain. It had been removed from her inbox, but not from the server's cache. It wasn't to Evan. It was to a family court mediator, dated 3 weeks prior. The subject line read, "Preparing to shift primary custody. Father unaware." My stomach turned. Claire wasn't just reacting to my distance. She'd been planning her own move. She was going to preempt me. Use her position, her network, her influence to reshape the narrative. Make me the absent father, the emotionally detached tech worker. She'd paint herself as the stable parent, a psychologist, a media figure, a protector. She was going to take Leo from me. That was the moment everything sharpened. All the emotions, anger, fear, betrayal, collapsed into focus. I couldn't afford to stumble, not once. I called the lawyer. "It's time," I said. She paused, then said, "Then we file. But we'll do it quietly, no announcement. Not yet. We'll serve notice at the right moment, when they least expect it." That night, I sat in Leo's room again. He was asleep, peaceful, unaware of the war quietly building around him. I whispered, "I'm going to fix this. I promise." But I had no idea what was still hidden, what final piece of the puzzle I hadn't yet seen. Because the real twist, the one that would tear the floor from under everything, was still waiting for me, just around the corner. And it was darker than I ever imagined. I thought I was in control. For weeks, I had moved like a shadow through my own life, collected, observant, meticulous. I built my custody case like a fortress, reinforced on all sides. Psychological evaluations, digital forensics, character witnesses lined up and ready. I even had a statement prepared from Leo's pediatrician, who had begun to note unusual emotional regression in his notes. All of it done discreetly without alerting Claire. The court documents were drafted and sealed. The service date was set. We were days away. But the thing about building fortresses is this: you can become blind to what's just outside the walls. The first sign came not from Claire or Evan, but from Leo. One morning, he handed me a crumpled sheet of paper while I was making breakfast. He said nothing, just placed it beside my coffee and sat down. It was a drawing again, his usual blend of symbols and figures, but this one was different. In it, he had drawn himself standing between two tall figures. One was me. The other, unmistakably, Evan. Claire was off to the side, watching. But Leo had scribbled out his own mouth, just an empty oval where it should have been. "No voice," I said quietly. He nodded. "It goes away sometimes." That one sentence haunted me. I looked at him, his little shoulders tense, his eyes trying to be brave, and something in me snapped. Not in rage, not in panic, but in clarity. I wasn't just protecting Leo from Claire and Evan anymore, I was protecting him from silence. From a childhood where his voice was smothered under manipulation and control, dressed up as guidance and love. But just as I was preparing to finalize everything, to file the motion and set the plan into motion, an unexpected piece of information fell into my hands, and it changed everything. I had a data crawler set up to ping me anytime Claire's name appeared in certain databases or public logs, an old cybersecurity habit. I used it to track new podcast appearances, social media mentions, and professional appointments. It was mostly noise, but one day it flagged an internal report from a private educational firm Evan had been consulting for. I nearly dismissed it until I saw the sender's address. It was an anonymous whistleblower email, dated a few weeks back. It had been sent to the company's compliance officer and flagged in a buried internal investigation. The subject line? Concern. Unethical behavior by Evan Reyes regarding client families. I opened the attached PDF. Inside was a summary of concerns from another parent, a mother. She'd hired Evan as a tutor for her 8-year-old son. She described a familiar pattern: Evan's warmth, his charm, his deeper involvement in the family's routines. Then things began to shift. Her son started becoming anxious, distrustful of his father, and eventually withdrawn. When she confronted Evan, he deflected. She dismissed it until she found a voice memo on her son's tablet where Evan was encouraging the boy not to share confusing feelings with daddy. It mirrored exactly what I'd seen in my own house. The company hadn't taken formal action. They cited lack of concrete proof. But the report had been logged, buried but there, waiting. And then I saw something else. The document listed other client families, referenced by first name only for privacy. One name stood out: Claire. She wasn't just a client. She had referred Evan to the firm originally, not just for Leo, for multiple families. She had vouched for him as a developmental strategist. And suddenly, the pieces began to fall together. Claire hadn't just fallen for Evan. She had recruited him, possibly before Leo was even diagnosed. The timeline was blurry, but the possibility that chilled me was this: what if Leo's diagnosis wasn't just something we reacted to? What if Claire had been subtly shaping it? She had the qualifications, the access, the ability to frame behaviors as clinical red flags. If she believed, even unconsciously, that she could better raise Leo on her own terms with Evan by her side, what better way to do that than to create a scenario where I appeared unnecessary? Disconnected? I remembered now all the times she told me, "Don't take it personally. You don't always get him the way I do." Was that love? Or was it a campaign? I contacted the whistleblower, carefully, through a burner email and encrypted relay. We spoke once. She was cautious but direct. She confirmed that Evan had a pattern: too friendly, too intimate, always crossing lines that felt invisible at first. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe he believes he's helping. That's the problem. The really dangerous ones never think they're doing harm." It was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was dealing with two people who had constructed a reality so carefully, so convincingly, that even they might believe it. And Leo was trapped in the middle of it. So I moved. I filed the custody motion. I submitted all the materials: the psychological reports, the surveillance footage, the transcripts, the metadata. I included the whistleblower document. I kept everything clean, factual, professional, deeply unemotional. The court sealed the case immediately. We served Claire 1 week later. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. No tears, no shouting, just a cold, measured look. "You've been watching us," she said. "I've been watching over him," I replied. She didn't deny anything, but she didn't confess either. That's how she operated, always hovering in that gray zone where intentions could be explained away as love, concern, therapy. But the courtroom doesn't work on vibes. It works on proof. And I had it. Still, I wasn't prepared for how painful it would be to see Leo pulled into the process. Child psychologists interviewed him. Custody evaluators spent time with both homes. I cooperated fully. Claire, too, put on her best performance: nurturing, present, poised. But the cracks began to show when Leo's responses started to paint a picture: confusion, fear of disappointing adults, not knowing which version of events he was supposed to believe. And then, the moment that turned everything upside down. During one of the supervised visits, Leo said something unprompted. "My tutor said Daddy doesn't love me because Daddy works with computers, and computers don't feel anything." The evaluator wrote it down word for word. It became the centerpiece of the case. Claire's lawyer scrambled to reframe it, but the damage was done. The evaluator's report concluded that there is clear evidence of emotional triangulation and inappropriate narrative shaping by third-party caregivers and possibly the mother. That's when Claire's team changed strategy. Suddenly she wanted shared custody, mediation, no more media statements. The shine wore off. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. We settled quietly. I was granted primary custody. Claire retained visitation, monitored for now. Evan? He disappeared. Quit the firm, deleted his online presence. I assume he saw the writing on the wall. Leo's healing didn't begin with the court decision. It began the day I sat him down and told him, plainly and lovingly, you don't have to choose, you just have to be yourself. That's all I want. He hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. In the months that followed, he began to open up. Slowly, his drawings changed, colors returned, the mouths had smiles again, his voice came back. I began therapy too, not because I was broken, but because I never wanted to mistake silence for strength again. Claire and I speak only through mediators now. I don't know what she tells herself about what happened. I don't need to. Because I know the truth. I saw it in the data, I saw it in Leo's eyes, and I lived it day after day in the quiet war that played out behind closed doors. But now the doors are open, and Leo is free.